Okay, so tonight we have 2.5 subjects that we're going to cover. We'll continue the third one next time. I think you'll find that this is fairly easy to digest. You'll know a lot about most of the subjects we're covering, so maybe we can speed through this and then have a chat about your own experiences with these things. So the first issue I want to talk about is types of personality. So these are 3 of the 5 components that Wilber says are essential ingredients of integral studies. So the first one is types of personality. So horizontal typologies are types of orientations possible at each of the various levels of consciousness. Some people find these typologies very useful understanding themselves and others. But it should be recognized that these horizontal typologies are of a fundamentally different nature than the vertical stages or levels of consciousness that we're going to talk about in a couple of weeks. The stages are universal levels through which individuals pass in the normal course of development, whereas typologies are types of personality that may or may not be found at any of the stages. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of typologies, but there isn't 1 or 2 or 3 that would necessarily need to be included in any integral spirituality or other integral approach. This distinguishes typologies from quadrants or levels, because those are essential ingredients. Now, if I'm not mistaken, we're going to pick up where we left off last time. So this leaves Bill as our first person to speak tonight. So I'll just screen share if I can get my mouse to do what it needs to do. And it's a short one, Bill, so it won't take you long.
You're muted, Bill.
Okay, that's good. I needed to
There we go.
practice.
Sorry, I didn't catch it right.
Yeah. But that said, specific typologies offer incredibly important forms of information and data that can be profoundly significant in specific approaches, and so definitely need to be taken with utmost seriousness.
Okay, thank you. So typologies are classification schemes that consist of characteristics that essentially remain the same through structure or stage development and state development. So if you're a 5 on the Enneagram, for instance, you tend to remain a 5 at archaic, magic, mythic, rational, pluralistic, and integral stages. So the simplest and best known typology is probably that of introverts versus extroverts. And we get that idea from this fellow. So in Psychological Types, a book published in 1921, Carl Jung suggested the principal distinction between personalities is the source and direction of an individual's expression of energy. He defined extroversion as an outward turning of libido and introversion as an inward turning of libido. Okay, the interest of the introvert is directed inwards. They think, feel, and act in ways that suggest the subject is the prime motivating factor. Extroverts, on the other hand, direct their interest towards their surrounding environment. They think, feel, and act in relation to external factors rather than the subjective ones. So introversion and extroversion are in some ways at the ends of the bell curve. Pronounced introversion and pronounced extroversion merely represent extremes of behavior. So does anything lie between the two? In that book I referred to, Jung accepted that there is an extensive third category and admitted it is difficult to determine whether this group's energy comes from within or without. Rather, it appears to be drawn from both ends of the introvert-extrovert spectrum in varying degrees. Other psychologists of the 1920s concurred, naming those in Jung's large third category ambiverts, as in ambidextrous, right? Ambiverts. These are considered to be the most normal people, with individuals showing flexibility between the two extremes. Introversion and extroversion are thus complex, multifaceted personality constructs. Individuals may fall at the extremes of each dimension, or more commonly lie somewhere in between the two, exhibiting traits of both. Introverts are considered to be reflective, private, thoughtful individuals, while extroverts are thought to be gregarious, assertive, adaptive, happy individuals with a tendency to take risks. The following graphic shows these differences. So you may have already decided which you are, which tendency you have more than others. And we could probably go around the room and point to each other and say, oh, you must be an extrovert. But we'd probably be wrong because we all have masks. So some of us are very good at having an extroverted mask, but we're really introverts, and vice versa. So Wilber makes the point that wherever you fall in this spectrum, you will continue to be an introvert, extrovert, or ambivert as you progress through every structure or level of consciousness. Now, another typology that's very famous is the Myers-Briggs one. Originally based on the insights of Carl Jung, it describes 4 main types: feeling, thinking, sensing, and intuiting. The best book about this typology, which its editor claims is the best-selling personality inventory in the world, is David Keirsey's Please Understand Me: Temperament, Character, and Intelligence. It includes the Myers-Briggs personality test and a lengthy chapter dedicated to each of the 4 main personalities and their subgroups. Its central message is that family members and institutions don't need to worry, even though they are fundamentally different from one another. It argues that they would do well to appreciate their many differences and stop trying to change others into copies of themselves. So some of you probably have this book, actually. It's well worth a purchase if you can find it. It's probably in a secondhand bookshop now. Fascinating material. So there are 16 possible combinations of these 4 types, 4 times 4. Thinking, feeling, sensing, and intuiting. These are arranged into 4 groups of 4: artisans, guardians, idealists, and rationalists. So after thinking about it for a while, I thought, why not? I'm going to give you my personal example. I fit into the idealist category, which includes teachers, counselors, champions, and healers. Based on my responses to the Myers-Briggs personality test, I believe I'm a counselor. I'm an INFJ. I would be considered a teacher if I was more of an extrovert. So I spent most of my academic career trying to be an extrovert in order to be a good teacher. But with you guys, I don't have to work so hard. I can be more myself. And I hope you don't mind that. So see if you would agree that this general description matches what you have come to know of me. Let me see. Oh, how about hangame? This is number 2 here.
Sure. Counseling is the side of mentoring that focuses on helping people to realize their human potential. And INFJs have an unusually strong desire to contribute to the welfare of others and genuinely enjoy guiding their companions toward greater personal fulfillment. INFJs are scarce, little more than 1% of the population, which is too bad, considering their usefulness in the social order. Although these counselors tend to be private, sensitive people, and thus are not usually visible leaders, they work intensely with those close to them, quietly exerting their influence behind the scenes with their families, friends, and colleagues. These exclusive and friendly people are complicated themselves, and so can understand and deal with complex ethical issues and with deeply troubled individuals.
One correction there, Hangame. I think it's seclusive rather than exclusive.
Oh,
So, I tend to be a bit of a hermit. It's weird having this read out in front of a whole group of people, I have to say.
I
But don't-
can well see you being an INFJ, Mark.
Oh, you can?
And I have a confession to make. I am an INFJ as well.
Oh my goodness, there you go. And another little tip is that Linda is as well. So how rare is it to have two
Wow.
1%ers married? That's bizarre.
And in a class of 20 people to have 3 of us.
Well, we should see if there's anybody else.
Yeah, that's
I
true.
don't know. But anyway, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to toot my own horn here. I only want to point out the surprising moments of self-recognition that an advanced typology is capable of producing. So if you haven't already done so, Myers-Briggs is well worth exploring. Once again, Wilbur contends that you will be any one or a combination of these 4 types at virtually all stages of development through your life. The third example of a typology is the Enneagram. This describes 9 basic types of human personality. And here they are in Helen Palmer's book, The Enneagram. Now, this one I don't know nearly as well. Anyway, so let's see. How about David Oak? If you could read number 3, that would be great.
I'll be glad to do it. I'm just trying to think of what type I am, but you can see from the names how different each type is, and you can probably guess they each have different good and bad manifestations, different strengths and weaknesses, different healthy and unhealthy major emotions and defenses, and different spiritual connections, among others. Some spiritual practices work well with some types. In other cases, they are positively damaging. The point is to use the Enneagram or similar typologies to help understand exactly where the student is in his or her own development, and tailor the teachings and practices to fit the personality type, so that spiritual practice isn't wasted on trying to change things that in most cases are just not open to change any more than the student's height or ethnic origin is. Ken Wilber, Integral Buddhism.
Okay, well done. Thank you. So that's an important point, not trying to change things that are actually pretty well carved in stone. You're just going to beat your head against the wall and be very unsatisfied.
Just one little point, that people shouldn't value one type over the other.
Mm-hmm.
I have a feeling that people who are introverts tend to look at themselves, or others even look at them as, let's say, not quite as with it as they do to an extrovert.
It's interesting. There's a very interesting book that came out about 3 or 4 years ago called Quiet, which is for all of those introverts in the crowd who feel a little one down. And so this author goes on to say, how marvelous the contributions of introverts are to the society around us, even though they're not tooting their own horn, like I said. Anyway, it's a good point, David. That these things are not in a hierarchy.
Yeah.
They're all equally valid, reliable sources of information about people. So as we mentioned before, considering the sheer number of typologies and the complexity of some of them, attempting to take them all into account is virtually impossible. The best you can do is to select one or two typologies that are well documented and often used. Wilbur personally favors the simple masculine, feminine, and the sophisticated Enneagram. So let's go to the first one there, masculine and feminine. For many feminists, male and female orientations also constitute a type. This is based primarily on work by Carol Gilligan and Deborah Tannen. The idea is that males tend to make judgments using hierarchical thinking, whereas women tend to make judgments using linking or relational thinking. Wilbur summarizes these two approaches as agency and communion. So Linda O'Neill was on. I hope she's back on now.
Yes,
I
she's
don't-
here.
Oh, great. Okay, Linda, could you read number 5, sorry.
Sure. Male logic, or a man's voice, tends to be based on terms of autonomy, justice, and rights, whereas women's logic or voice tends to be based on terms of relationship, care, and responsibility. Men tend toward agency, women tend toward communion. Men follow rules, women follow connections. Men look, women touch. Men tend toward individualism, women toward relationship. Ken Wilber, The Integral Operating System.
Now, notice that we're talking about tending to do, and I know that each of us is an amalgam of both genders. So, we shouldn't hold these too tightly, or we're going to get into trouble with each other, I think. So, this is Carol Gilligan, who I mentioned a minute ago. She wrote a book called In a Different Voice, which was published in 1982. It showed that men and women both develop through 4 major levels of moral development. Now, we've introduced these before: pre-conventional, conventional, post-conventional, and integrated. Women, however, advance through these hierarchical stages differently than men. So we need to go back to reading number 6. And how about Marie? Could you read this one for us? This is a concrete example of that, the differences.
Some boys are playing baseball. A kid takes his 3rd strike and is out, so he starts to cry. The other boys stand unmoved until the kid stops crying. After all, a rule is a rule, and the rule is 3 strikes and you're out. Gilligan points out that if a girl is around, she will usually say, "Ah, come on, give him another try." The girl sees him crying and wants to help, wants to connect, wants to heal. This, however, drives the boys who are playing this game as an initiation into the world of rules and male logic nuts. Gilligan says that the boys will therefore hurt feelings in order to save the rules. The girls will break the rules in order to save the feelings. Ken Wilber, The Integral Operating System.
Well, I don't know how each of you would feel about that, but let's look at the 4 stages of moral growth that Gilligan has determined. So as I said, in the middle of column here, we have egocentric. Well, sorry, we didn't really cover it this way. The first stage is the selfish one, where you're only caring about yourself. It's also egocentric. Then it moves to care, which is to your tribe or your country or your nation. So there's an ethnocentric feel to this. Eventually, and this is what Baha'is are driving for, is there's a universal care for all human beings, regardless of race, color, sex, or creed. And that's a world-centric view. Finally, there's the integrated level, where you integrate the masculine and feminine in myself and extend care to all sentient beings without exception. So you can see some of that actually happening in society at the moment. There's a definite move in that direction, visible to everyone. So this final stage is one in which individuals start to befriend both the masculine and feminine modes in themselves, even if they characteristically act predominantly from one or the other. Okay, so the next one is healthy and unhealthy individuals. There's another interesting feature of types. According to research, they can be either healthy or unhealthy. Unhealthy people might be called sick boy or sick girl. A healthy masculine principle tends towards autonomy, strength, independence, and freedom. But should these positive virtues be under fire or over fire, in the sense of running away with themselves, the principle becomes unhealthy or pathological. Okay, so Jennifer, I hope your voice is up to this, number 7.
There is not just autonomy, but alienation, not just strength, but domination, not just independence, but morbid fear of relationship and commitment, not just a drive towards freedom, but a drive to destroy. The unhealthy masculine principle does not transcend in freedom, but dominates in fear.
Okay, thank you. So a healthy feminine principle tends towards flowing, relationship, care, and compassion. The unhealthy feminine flounders in each of these. Harold, what's you? Number 8.
Instead of being in relationship, she becomes lost in relationship. Instead of a healthy self in communion with others, she loses herself altogether and is dominated by the relationship she is in. Not a connection, but a fusion. Not a flow state, but a panic state. Not a communion, but a meltdown. The unhealthy feminine principle does not find fullness in connection, but chaos in fusion.
So according to the integral model, these types help us to identify both the healthy and unhealthy masculine and feminine dimensions operating in ourselves and others. Pointing out an unhealthy type is not intended to be a way to judge people, but rather as a way to understand and communicate with them more clearly and effectively. So there's one last point to make. Just a minute. What the world is going on? I think I needed to have taken this paragraph out. Sorry, I didn't take it out when I needed to. Too many revisions. Okay, so now let's switch to the second topic, which is the bodies that we have. And these are in the upper right quadrant. So remember the 4 quadrants. Upper left is all of the interior levels of consciousness that we can experience. And the upper right are all the things that are going on, for instance, with your brain as you ascend these different states. So each of us has 3 major states of consciousness: waking, dreaming, and formless sleep. The wisdom traditions, particularly in Southeast Asia, maintain that each of us also has 3 bodies for those states. In these cases, they are often called the gross body, the subtle body, and the causal body, as in here. Now, in the final column here to the right, you have the sheaths, as they're called in Hinduism. And as you read Wilbur and even Buddhism, you'll find references to these anakosha, pranakosha, etc. So this idea is a bit disconcerting to Westerners encountering the idea for the first time. We're not used to thinking of ourselves as having more than one body. For the wisdom traditions, a body is a mode of experience or energetic feeling. There are coarse or gross experiences, subtle or refined experiences, and very subtle or causal experiences. Each of these is what philosophers would call a phenomenological reality. So when you're dreaming, you're in your dream body. They're realities that present themselves to our immediate awareness. This means that at this very moment, you actually have access to a gross body and its gross energy, a subtle body and its subtle energy, and a causal body along with its causal energy. So this next quote is actually an example of that. Let me go back here. This is number 9. So Linda Russell, how about you?
Reading number 9. Notice that right now you are in a waking state of awareness. As such, you are aware of your gross body, the physical, material, sensory motor body. But when you dream at night, there is no gross physical body. It seems to have vanished. You are aware in the dream state, yet you don't have a gross body of dense matter, but a subtle body of light, energy, emotional feelings, fluid and flowing images. In the dream state, the mind and soul are set free to create as they please, to imagine vast worlds not tied to gross sensory realities, but reaching out almost magically to touch other souls, other people, and far-off places, wild and radiant images cascading to the rhythm of the heart's desire. Ken Wilber, The Integral Operating System.
Okay. So, but what about the third body we supposedly also have, the causal body? Maybe Merrill could read this one for us. It's number 10.
As you pass from the dream state with its subtle body into the deep sleep state, even thoughts and images drop away, and there is only a vast emptiness, a formless expanse beyond any individual I or ego or self. The great wisdom traditions maintain that in this state, which might seem like merely a blank or nothingness, we are actually plunged into a vast formless realm, a great emptiness or ground of being, an expanse of consciousness that seems almost infinite. Along with this almost infinite expanse, there is an almost infinite body or energy, the causal body, the body of the finest, most subtle experience possible, a great formlessness out of which creative possibilities can arise.
Okay, thank you. Of course, most of us do not experience that deep state of consciousness in a full fashion. However, the wisdom traditions assure us that it is possible, given sufficient preparation and practice, to enter this formless state and its causal body with full awareness. And we saw Wilbur do that when we were describing how he was entering all these different brain states when he was hooked up to an EKG machine. So this, if you admit that this is possible, it opens up an extraordinary potential for growth and awareness associated with the ground of being itself. So to summarize Wilbur's points regarding the bodies, but this time using terms from the great chain or nest of being that we've already discussed, let's look at this here. So we have the 4 bodies down on the left-hand side, the body, the mind, the soul, and the spirit. Okay. And then obviously the body is in the terrestrial realm. Now, according to Ibn Arabi, this is the realm of the senses or sensible experience. And in the Baha'i faith, you'll remember that this is Nasut, which is a term we borrowed from Hinduism, or Islam, sorry, what am I talking about? The next is the mental body, which is the intermediate state or realm. In Ibn Arabi, this is the realm of imagination or images, which corresponds to Malakut. And then we have the soul, which inhabits the celestial realm. In Sufism, these are in the presence of lordship, and that is Jabarut. Now, I'm not saying that we're capable of this, although Wilbur seems to be saying it, that your spirit is in the infinite realm, which is where the names and attributes or the presence of divinity is, and Lahut. It's fairly clear from what Abdu'l-Baha has said about Thomas Breakwell that the top end of the possibilities for human beings is actually Jabarut. And in the Baha'i scheme, Lahut is reserved for the manifestations of God alone. So I would quarrel with him about how these would line up. Maybe he wouldn't agree that this system over here on the right, actually corresponds with what he's talking about. I'm not 100% sure that the spirit that he's referring to corresponds to the names and attributes. This is tentative at best. Anyway, let's see where we go from here. So, to my mind, this list immediately invites us to compare it with Ibn Arabi's 5 divine planes that we discussed way back in class 7 in part 1. It also relates to the 5 realms of being we studied relating to the Baha'i faith in part 1, class 10. So let's take a look at this. So you'll recognize this, I hope. These are the 5 divine planes that Ibn Arabi has specified. Now I had arranged them from top down, but let's go the other way. So the plane of the senses, and then we go to the plane of images, which is the Alamo Mithal, the world of imagination. And then Rububiyah, which is the presence of lordship. And finally, the presence of divinity. So in the Baha'i scheme, human beings never go beyond number 3. They don't go up to 2, and they certainly don't go to number 1, which is Ibn Arabi's way of describing God in its unmanifest state. And then there's Jack's diagram, which we've had occasion to see on more than one occasion. It's just a different way of arranging the information that we've just seen. So you have the world of Nasut, where we live most of the time. The realm of Malakut, where we go at night in our dreams, but also in visions. Jabarut, which I'd say very few human beings ever get to. And there's a dotted line here. There's no way in the world we go beyond this. God is Lahut, which is where the manifestations of God live. And then way up here, which really shouldn't even be on the chart at all. It's like the paper itself is God as Hahut. The way is barred, to seek it is impiety. Nothing whatsoever can be said about that level. So that's from Jack in his Prolegomena to a Baha'i Theology back in 1992. So if we attempt to synthesize these 3 charts of the bodies all human beings possess, we get the following chart. And this is open to critique for sure. Perhaps we can come back to this once I'm finished talking, which won't be too long from now, actually. We can revisit this and see if you have any suggestions that you'd like to make about this. Anyway, to return to Wilber, his integral model reminds us to check in with our waking state realities, our subtle state dreams, visions, and innovative ideas, as well as our own open, formless ground of possibilities that is the source of so much creativity. By touching base with as many of our potentials as possible, we will miss nothing in terms of possible solutions to the problems we face, individually and collectively. This is where inspiration comes from, folks, which is what we're going to have to heavily rely on in order to deal with the real world problems we're facing at the moment. Okay, so now we're ready to talk about states. This is the third topic. We're only going to get about halfway into it tonight. States in Arabic are maqam or maqamat. So these events occur in the upper right quadrant. Okay, so this is where all of our brain states, for instance, are. They are all directly available to our awareness. Their defining characteristic is their fleeting nature. No matter how stupendous or commonplace they may be, states of consciousness always come and always go. As we will see, this is in stark contrast to structures of consciousness, which are permanent acquisitions. So these are sort of the natural states that Wilber keeps talking about. And in the right-hand column are the list of names from Tibetan Buddhism. So there's the waking state, the dreaming state, the deep formless state. He posits another one called witnessing before we get to the non-dual state. So in Buddhism, it's the gross, the subtle, the causal, something called the Turiya, which is the fourth after these three, and the Turiyatita, which is beyond the fourth. Now, as a result of modern research, we might also have to add certain other states which occur naturally. So for instance, there's the hypnotic or the hypnagogic, and also flow states. In addition, there are a huge number of non-ordinary states. These are available to us under a variety of circumstances. And that's just a quick way of referring to these. Some of these have many, many, many potential names underneath the altered states and the peak experiences particularly. There are many here that are not being described in full. Now, it's interesting that Wilber does not spend very much time on non-ordinary states. He focuses more on the natural ones. A lot of the, I mean, he is considered to be the sort of leading light in the transpersonal studies area. But a lot of people in that field have devoted an enormous amount of time, for instance, in this drug-induced one. All the psychedelics, there's a huge amount of research on that that he doesn't seem to pay much attention to. Although the meditative states or trained states are something that Wilber does focus a great deal on, because it's such a big issue in things like Buddhism and Hinduism. So most cultures, and certainly the great traditions, have what you could call a cartography of states. And so these include natural, exogenous, and endogenous states. Some of the meditative cartographies are incredibly elaborate, but they're all based on upper right quadrant methodologies and injunctions. So some of these are Zazen, centering prayer, vipassana, dervish whirling, contemplation, etc. These states can be confirmed as phenomenological experiences by those who wish to undertake the appropriate injunctions, such as sit on this mat, count your breath from 1 to 10 until you don't lose count for at least an hour. Follow this mantra, take this drug, dance like this, become one with the koan, etc. Those are all injunctions. This is how you get into those altered states. Okay. How about Nina for number 11? Are you there, Nina?
Sorry, no, I'll pass this time. It's okay.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you.
Okay, let me see here. How about Sai?
Okay. When you correctly follow those injunctions, you will have a series of phenomenological experiences. Whether these phenomenological experiences, I see what feels like infinite light and love, of actual ontological reference, there is a divine ground of being, is, needless to say, an interesting question. That's a confusing sentence.
Yeah, I thought it might be. So I've looked up a definition of phenomenology for everybody. This is the study of the development of human consciousness and self-awareness as a preface to or a part of philosophy. So it's a huge field, actually, or it's an approach, if you like. And you may remember me talking about taking a phenomenological approach to the way I study some of the things we're talking about. Ontological is a particular theory about the nature of being or the kinds of things that have existence. So what he's saying here in this number 11, these phenomenological experiences are things that you actually feel personally. They may or may not actually have a real existence in the world. They may not be ontologically true, but you have experienced them. Okay, that's all he's saying here. Throwing around these big terms, trying to confuse people. According to the great wisdom traditions, all men and women have available to them at least 5 natural states of consciousness, all of which can be directly experienced. So we've been talking about this a lot, so I thought we should actually hear exactly what we're talking about. So David Erickson, could you read the first 3 and then maybe Belinda would read 4 and 5 for us in number 12?
Yeah, sure. Okay. Gross waking states, such as I might experience riding a bike or reading this page, are doing body work. Subtle dream states, such as I might experience in a vivid dream or in a vivid daydream or visualization exercise, as well as in certain types of meditation with form. Causal formless states, such as deep dreamless sleep, and types of formless meditation, and experiences of vast openness or emptiness. You read 4 and 5.
For witnessing states, or the witness, which is a capacity to witness all of the other states. For example, the capacity for unbroken attention in the waking state and the capacity to lucid dream. And 5, ever-present non-dual awareness, which is not so much a state as the ever-present ground of all states and can be, quote, experienced as such.
Okay, thank you. So that obviously covers a great deal of background research and his own personal experiences and our own personal experiences to some extent. So both Vedanta Hinduism and Vajrayana Buddhism maintain that these states and their corresponding bodies or realms of being are available to all human beings by virtue of possessing the precious human body. This means that all these major states of being and consciousness are available to some degree to all human beings at virtually any stage of growth, including infants, simply because even infants wake, dream, and sleep. Now, let me just see. Now, who's this guy? Mr. Smiley. This is Abraham Maslow. Peak experiences were originally described by psychologist Abraham Maslow as moments of highest happiness and fulfillment in his 1964 work, Religions, Values, and Peak Experiences. A peak experience is an altered state of consciousness characterized by euphoria, often achieved by self-actualizing individuals. The term represents his attempt to designate those experiences which have generally been identified as religious and whose origins have been thought of as supernatural. In a 1970 book, Maslow believed the origin, core, and essence of every known high religion was the private, lonely, personal illumination, revelation, or ecstasy of some acutely sensitive prophet or seer. Okay, so let me see who we've got here. How about Lori? I'll just pull up number 13 here. I have to switch over. There it is.
Okay. Peak experiences are rare, exciting, oceanic, deeply moving, exhilarating, elevating experiences that generate an advanced form of perceiving reality and are even mystic and magical in their effect upon the experimenter.
Okay, thank you. So there are several unique characteristics of a peak experience, but each element is perceived together in a holistic manner that creates the moment of reaching one's full potential. Peak experiences can range from simple activities to intense events. However, it is not necessarily about what the activity is, but the ecstatic, blissful feeling that is being experienced during it. Maslow's early studies suggested that common triggers for peak experiences included art, nature, sex, creative work, music, scientific knowledge, and introspection. Since then, peak experience has been closely associated with the psychological phenomenon known as flow. However, the two are not identical. Peak experience differs from flow in several ways, one of which is the subjective level of experience intensity. Peak experience usually involves a high level of stimulation or euphoria, while flow is not normally associated with an increased level of stimulation. Because the states of consciousness are ever present, it is possible for us to have a peak experience of higher states of consciousness, such as the subtle, causal, witnessing, or non-dual states at any time. The same cannot be said of structures of consciousness, as we will see. Although the contours of these major states of being are available naturally and spontaneously to all humans, Some of them can be intensely trained or investigated. So as we will see next week, these trained states hold some surprises. And that, my friends, is the end of my chat, which gives us 37 minutes to talk. Oh, Harold's right off the mark. Okay, what are we saying here, Harold?
Yeah, I'm sort of fascinated with these levels of reality, and Jabba root, is sometimes described as the revealed God acting within creation.
Mm-hmm.
So you might think of that as the realm of manifestations in their revelatory mode. I don't think it's. I'm going to keep researching this until the day I die, I think, but I don't think human beings can get to Jabba root. And I think there's some very important ethical consequences of making that clear eventually. A lot of people think when Abdu'l-Baha says Peter cannot become Christ, that's really worth emphasizing, that the levels of creation are kind of important. I think especially there's a lot of people today who think that they can become, they evolve into divinity. A larger and larger percentage of people think and talk that way. And along with this goes things like, well, at that point, you don't have to worry about ethics and rules. And I think Baha'u'llah goes out of his way to clarify that's wrong in the Seven Valleys, which I heard a talk on that recently, a 2-hour talk on the Seven Valleys that was emphasizing how Baha'u'llah reformed and in a sense defined mysticism. And part of his reform was to clarify that we don't actually get to that level. So we need to be subordinate to that level, receptive to that level, revering of that level. But if we think, well, sometimes you can actually get there yourself, you lose respect for that level of reality, and along with it, the meaning of revelation. So I don't know, I think it's rather important, although, again, it needs to be investigated. I don't think the Baha'i faith is claiming we can get there. And it's important to know that we can't, I believe, for a bunch of reasons.
That's an excellent point, Harold. And I too feel like I'm going to investigate this for many years to come. I mean, to what degree did Thomas Breakwell have access to Jabba root? Did he just get to peek in the, in between the slats of the window or something? Or did he live there? I don't think he lived there. He was a young man when he died, so he didn't have a lot of time, but he did have access to it briefly. But that's all. So I'm not sure that those diagrams I put together for you tonight are accurate, although we have to struggle with the idea that's visible in Buddhism and Hinduism, particularly, that it is possible to become divine. And then we have to square that with Baha'u'llah talking about the divine spark inside each of us that is prompting our growth and yearning, etc. There's a lot of work in wrestling with ideas that we have to do before this becomes clear. So consider these diagrams sort of draft number 1 out of 100. Okay, Jack, you had your hand up there. I wasn't expecting to see you because you've been so ill.
Yeah, well, thank you for exempting me from reading, but I just wanted to say that I agree with everything Harold said about these levels of creation. And it's very rigid within the Baha'i faith. The world doesn't know these limitations. if I remember correctly, Abdu'l-Baha said that Breakwell went to the threshold of Jabarut, which means he didn't actually get in, but he was somewhere very close. So it's not normally where human beings go, but he was, of course, a very special soul. And you know, there's a lot of mysteries in these things. Like, you know, we're never going to be able to figure out all this stuff rationally. I mean, this is the way God works in the world. We can't figure everything out. We never will be able to. I wanted to mention the merit of Maslow, who was a very great Jewish psychologist, was that he brought the mystical world into psychology in terms that could be understood and accepted by both academics and non-academics. He was criticized for it, by the way, but he obviously brought something unique with the peak experiences and the oceanic and flow or whatever else were the terms that he described, inspiration in the arts and so on and so forth. And he made this whole realm of the, if you like, the divine, you know, acceptable in psychology. I mean, other than mysticism, which is its usual place, he made, you know, and it's of course due to his Jewish background. Of course it is. And the education that he received as a Jew. And so I think for me, Maslow has got very great merit. And he, you know, I think it's one of the one book you were reading from. Yeah, he's really onto something good there.
I agree with you 100%. He is, he played a key role in the development of our understanding of how religion is connected to psychology. Yeah. Okay, Sai.
Trying to, I saw my hand. Okay, so am I muted or not?
No, you're on. Yep.
Okay, I just want to comment on the non-ordinary states, the third, the exogenous, the drug-induced, where you said Wilbur wasn't too interested. Just there's quite a bit going on, like you say, the ayahuasca, I'm sure you'd heard of ayahuasca, is a plant they now got, they take you into different states. And then now they're starting to, YouTube has, there's even movies now where you get, say, a drug addict that's on heroin and goes to the jungle, wherever, and takes this ayahuasca, come back all cured. But, and there's DMT is another, that's more chemical one I think they're experimenting with to reach these different levels. But, so I just wanted to point that out. But the one question or maybe comment, or I'm not even sure what it is, but I'd like to make like a statement regarding these, everything to do with meditating and all of that. When you close your eyes and you get this feeling like, as I was getting older and older, I thought you'd read about all these people as if they're going somewhere, you know, not physically so much as if they're going somewhere. And it seems to be the thought that as if you're going into another world or something, as a, you know, experience, but really you're still just inside your brain. I mean, the way I look at it, you're not going anywhere, but what's happening is in your brain, everything's in there. Now, if you're trying to say that there's another brain over there that might somehow connect with you, I don't know. But I'm saying all these experiences are inside you, and you're not, you know what I'm trying to say, that some people, you get the feeling that you're almost as if you're going somewhere. You know, do you know what I mean?
I do. One of the ways it's referred to as astral traveling.
Yes.
And in those cases, I think I've read enough anecdotes about that to not be willing to close the door on the possibility that this is a possibility for people to actually move their consciousness from where it is in this basement room right now to somewhere else on the planet or even beyond this planet.
Yeah.
temporarily, and then have an experience of some kind, interact in some way with what's there, and come back.
So is that what is meant by these different realms then? You're going sort of to a place, experiencing, coming back, or you just, everybody's got their own individual little levels in their own self, and you're not sharing it with anyone. They just somehow gave a name to it. Like, that's where I get lost, because
Yeah.
I can't accept the fact, not that, I'm not talking about physical either.
No,
It's not a measure of science or not. It's just a matter of, is there, because we do know there is evidence that plants communicate with each other, or plants can feel energy somehow, but they don't seem to go into it too much. But anyway, there's energy we don't understand, let's say. No different than when they didn't understand magnetism a couple thousand years ago. That's what we're like now with love and all these other energies we don't understand. So I'm kind of thinking maybe there is an energy that connects humans or connects these worlds somehow that we just haven't reached the understanding of. But that's, again, you're starting to reach for trying to explain something you can't explain.
Well, and Wilbur is talking about energy taking the form of a body. That's why I brought up the subject of the body. So there's a subtle body, which is a much more rarefied kind of energy field than what we're currently experiencing at the moment.
Yeah, and I guess
and there are stories that I've read of people being able to contact each other in their dream bodies.
And I guess what throws me is that we always think we're limited to our 5 senses, and that's it. But it's possible we have senses we aren't aware of.
That's one of the implications of what he's saying. Yep. That we're skilled in many, many levels of consciousness without our being aware of it at this physical level. But when we get there, we have developed capacities because we go there all the time, at least every 24 hours. It's a big topic. There's a lot of questions. Okay, Lori, you've been very patient.
I was thinking, just going back to Thomas Breakwell again, my ears prick up when I hear that, because one of my grandsons is named after Thomas Breakwell. But for me, I have to sort of, I'm not an academic, so I have to have things make practical sense. And to me, it would maybe seem like maybe Thomas Breakwell, among with other people, were in this big mansion with lots of doors. And there was one door that had, the round thing that you have in your exterior door sometimes, so you can look outside in the other world. So maybe he was a person who found that door and had a little, I think, a peek into Jabberwoot. Is it Jabberwoot?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
that's interesting.
that makes it good for me. And then something different when we were looking at personality types, I think there's there's a lot of worth in that. And I'm relating it to what we do concretely in the faith with both with our elections and consultations, so that if we were all the same personality type, I don't think probably that I don't think we vote for people who have the same, they're not going to be all ESTJs or something like that. I think there's a variety and it helps understanding. And then when we're actually consulting, we need to be able to tell the difference between an introvert and an extrovert. And we have to have a little bit of a behavior of both in consultation, because we have to listen. Introverts are very good at listening. And also we have to share our opinion, and that's an extrovert behavior. So in consultations, we can't be 100% introvert and we can't be 100% extrovert. And I think that this just helps me understand more.
That's good. I like that. I like the connection you've just drawn. Okay, so is it Belinda or is it David that would like to speak first? David, okay, so you need to unmute yourself.
I just
Sure.
wanted to say I have nothing to say. But anyway, just, well, you know, Al says that the human reality is such that we have many or other powers within us that have not been revealed to us yet. It's innate in us, but have not come out yet and are not meant to come out yet. So we have powers that have come out that could not have come out with the people in Moses's time and so on. And you know, and even in Christianity and so on. I mean, it's a step-by-step thing. And gradually, as human beings, we unfold. But it takes an awful lot of time, you know. And you know, I wanted to mention the human heart. I've referred to the human heart before in these sessions, but you know, the greatest mystery of all, when you consider, like any of you have gone through Said's book on the Bob, and then there's Baha'u'llah too. The greatest mystery, and I think even Baha'u'llah says this somewhere in the Four Valleys, is the human heart. A lot of us don't even know what that means.
Mhm.
And but in a real sense, the reality of all things is concentrated in the human heart. And the more we come to know one level or another in the human heart, the more human we become, the more knowledgeable we become, the more conscious we become. So that, you know, so that in another certain way, you know, our thinking, you know, our rational side, yeah, you know, it's a method by which we learn about this, that, or the other thing, and then we go on from there and see if we can put this or that into practice, or you know, find out more about it and so on and so forth. But there's something that is beyond all words, that is beyond, you know, if you don't mind me saying so, the phenomenological world. And all that resides or is in the human heart. So that a lot of all of this, maybe I'm wrong, but an awful lot of this can be realized in the human heart in terms of our being. And although, you know, we have a rational faculty, and it's important, it's only a beginning. It's only a beginning. So a lot, I think, of not just, well, knowledge and of doing and of being, you know, is in the silence and the interstitial, you know, between one thing and another. a lot of it's in the silence. And I think, Mark, that's something that I think is implicit in Buddhism.
No.
So that, who we really are, we find in the revelations of the manifestations of God. And it's a gradual process, it's a gradual thing.
So, as you're talking about the gradualness of it all, it makes me think that that's more tightly related to the structures of consciousness that we're going to be talking about in another week or two.
Yeah.
Because that's where the natural character unfolds slowly over time. And you're making permanent acquisitions as you go along.
Yeah.
The states of consciousness, particularly those peak states, are glimpses, if you like, of what's coming. They're tantalizing. They draw you on. They excite you. They encourage you to continue to work towards evolving. So they play a very important role, but they're just temporary little flashes of light, right?
Yeah.
Tastes.
Um,
Yeah, go ahead, Belinda.
Well, I wanted to comment on two things. I wanted to go back to your second reading about INFs, more than the 1% of the population, and you notice there were at least 3 in this group. I'd like to comment, first of all, I think this group is top heavy with introverts.
Possibly.
Yeah. Oh, just look around. Come on. And so in that case, it's not too surprising that there could be 3 of one of that type in this group, possibly even more. But the other thing I wanted to comment on was I started thinking during the conversation about the mirroring principle. And Baha'u'llah and Ahmad both talk about the mirror and how the mirror reflects. It doesn't originate light, but it reflects light.
Yep.
And maybe in that sense, that's what happened to Thomas Brakel or other people like that. For a moment, he reflected the light from a certain level.
Okay.
It did not become part of him because it couldn't. But for a moment, he reflected it.
Nice.
And I think that's what a lot of happens with us. We get moments where we reflect something from a level that we don't expect to be and won't stay at, or a state we don't expect to be in and won't stay in. But it may be that the ability to reflect that light or reflect that whatever it is there. I'm done.
That's very, very interesting. Now, Jack, I see your hand up, but I noticed that Harold had his hand up previously, and I know he typically has to leave early. So I'm wondering if there's anything you want to say first, Harold, and then we'll switch to Jack. Oh, you're not.
I'm not going anywhere. Jack first.
Oh, okay. I thought you'd have another class.
Not tonight.
Okay, good. Okay, Jack, go ahead.
Well, I think there's some really good conversation going on tonight. It's really excellent. And I wanted to go back to a point. I'm not thinking quite clearly with my head being the way it is, but I think I can put my thoughts together. I want to go back to a point that Harold made earlier. You know, one of our biggest challenges as in teaching the faith is to explain who the manifestation of God is. This is one of our biggest challenges. Of course, Christians, for Christians, it's all Jesus and nobody else. I mean, generally speaking, I'm talking about, not talking necessarily about enlightened Christians like Merrill, but for a lot of evangelicals, it's Jesus or nobody, you know. And so we as Baha'is who see all of the manifestations of God as one brother, even though there are gradations within them, and what they have accomplished in civilization building. You know, Abdul Baha said that even the minutest details, and that's a pretty close quote, the minutest details of civilized life have come from the prophets. And, you know, Harold was absolutely right in the glib way that people talk these days about becoming divine. You know, I have a friend here at the co-op who's a spiritual man who basically follows the Hindu traditions, but he has no use for prophets. He thinks prophets are the big problem in religion and civilization. He's all into gurus, and he absolutely believes, and of course we see this in Hindu practice, in the reverence that the guru commands from the followers. They absolutely believe that these men are 100% divine.
Yep.
And, you know, when I challenged him a little bit on this, he said, well, do you think they're lying when they make this claim? You know, so there is a lot of work to be done at this level, you know, about,
Yeah.
it's an important foundation. I taught with at school with a couple of ladies who were very spiritual, and we used to have spiritual conversations. I remember one day one of them said to me, boy, you put a lot of emphasis on these prophets, she said. I think you're putting too much emphasis on them. So, yeah, excuse me, but for us, we can't really put enough, you know, because if Baha'u'llah is correct, and of course as Baha'is we believe he is, then all of the higher manifestations of God are one essence. You know, when Jesus said, before Moses was I am, you know, wasn't he drawing in a sense a connection between himself and Moses? And if he, no, actually, I'm quoting the wrong verse because my brain is a bit fuddled. But the other thing that Jesus said was, if ye had known Moses, ye would have known me.
Mm-hmm.
If ye had known Moses, you would have known me. So Christ was drawing that connection between himself and Moses. So I'm just saying we've got a lot of work cut out there to explain, you know, the connection between the prophets, the major manifestations and their followers and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Because much of our success, I mean, some people think now it's all about community building and it doesn't matter too much what we believe anymore, because we're building community. That's one of the big buzzwords, which is true. But a lot of our credibility as a religion hinges on the fact who, it's no different. You know, when Christ said to Peter, who do men say that I am? And, you know, Peter answered him, thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. And it's the same thing. People will say, who is Baha'u'llah? What are his claims? That he came in the glory of the Father to unite all mankind. So anyway, I'm rambling on, but these are really important foundational teachings that I think it's going to take generations and generations and for mankind to fully comprehend the difference between the guru, who admittedly well, can achieve very high states, like Mark, you were telling us Wilbur can do the alpha, the beta. What's the other? What's the
Delta.
other? The delta at will through training.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter how far they go or how many mystical experiences they've had or you've had or I've had. Peter cannot become Christ. That's what Harold said, and that's absolutely correct.
Yeah.
So
and they're missing, well, a point that Harold has made on more than one occasion is that they have forgotten where they got the information about their beliefs in the first place.
Mhm.
I mean, how many times does Wilbur talk about the Buddha and his specific teachings?
Yeah.
That's where it came from, folks.
Yep.
Anyway, Harold, did you want to reply in any way to what Jack was just saying, or did you had your hand up as well? So you might have had a question.
Yeah, this is just more of a comment. Earlier it came up about whether consciousness can go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm interpreting that the Baha'i writings are sort of saying yes. I just want to share a comment this is from the Tablet of the Universe. It's untranslated, I think, or not officially translated.
Right.
Tablet of the Universe. And the Abdu'l-Baha is saying things like, physical things are signs and imprints of spiritual things. Every lower thing is an image and counterpart of a higher thing. And in the next sentence is very long, but he's saying that these inward and outward realities are all connected, one with another, and are interrelated in such a manner that you will find that drops are patterned after seas and atoms are structured after suns. So, I think that's sort of the words connected and interrelated struck me there. And going back to what David was talking about earlier, you might say the mind or the heart, it can go either direction. It can go toward spiritual things and it can go toward material things and it interrelates them. I'm also thinking of John Hatcher's book called Close Connections. And I think the theme of that book is that the mind is sort of the missing link between the spiritual realm and the material realm. The mind goes both ways. So that's the interconnectedness. So anyway, so I think that we do move, but it's a metaphor, of course. But there's also empirical evidence that you, for example, Swedenborg saw a fire that was 300 miles away. He announced to everybody a certain city was burning. He wasn't there, but it was burning. He saw it, he says. And anyway, so consciousness appears to be able to go back and forth, both in the spiritual realm and in the material realm to a degree. Yeah.
Okay. Now, is that David or Belinda this time?
No, we're not. Oh, now we're on mute.
Yeah, now we're on. Woo!
That's a problem with having somebody else controlling the mouse.
Linda was playing around. She did it.
Okay, I can't. He has it over there. Anyway, I wanted to comment. God, I've lost my. The word prophet. I think we need to be careful using the word prophet when we apply it to Baha'u'llah, and we're talking with people who are with other religions or none at all, or what have you. I think because they don't understand the meaning of the word. That meaning has been lost.
Yeah.
And they'll think, oh yeah, somebody who predicts the future, which is one of the many, many functions that a prophet has, but it's only one. And so I think that's one of the reasons why when I first became a Baha'i, they very quickly introduced the idea of the word manifestation. And I think that we need to do that more directly to explain what we're talking for people.
You're muted again for some reason.
Oh, fuck.
Oh, there.
No, we're not
okay.
muted.
I hope you didn't hear the last word. Yeah, I was just saying that I think we have to introduce the word manifestation, make it very clear to people we're talking with about what that means.
Yeah, profit can be many things.
And because the word, the general population has no clue what the word profit means anymore. Muslims might have some idea, but our Christian and formerly Christian neighbors on the whole don't have a clue. There was something else I wanted to say, but I can't remember what it is now.
Well, come back if you can think of
If
it.
I remember, yeah, thank
Yeah.
you.
Okay, Bill from
Take
Texas.
down. Take the hand down.
I would probably like to be known as Bill from Canada, but it's okay, we'll get there. The thing that occurs to me listening to these things is that it seems that we have a hierarchy, whether we're just taking a mass of something and parsing it apart so that we can get our minds around it. But we have a hierarchy. We refer to Maslow's stuff as hierarchy of needs, and we refer to spiritual states. So the 7 valleys is not linear as much as it is hierarchical in terms of you're going from one state of awareness to the next. And I'm looking around at the humanity that I experience wherever I'm at. And I'm seeing struggling, and I'm seeing striving, and I'm seeing stumbling, and if we say that a person has a set of needs, that if they meet them, those needs, then they become more aware or more closer to the spiritual potential of people, then we're saying that all the stuff that is above us with those needs or with those obstacles to getting to that level, are weights upon us in terms of being able to accomplish that. And if we're saying that, then we're saying that if the struggling is spiritual, we can help others with that struggle. But if the struggle that we see people are involved in is material, it is a total distraction from this hierarchy of needs from a spiritual perspective. And that if we try to help people avoid that struggle in the material world, to help them bridge to the spiritual world, then I think that's kind of where we have that. To me, that's what teaching would be, whether you're Baha'i or Christian or otherwise. And if you're doing that, if you're looking at the struggling that people are doing, that is totally unproductive for their state of awareness, for their spiritual well-being. And you work to help alleviate that striving and direct it, and that struggling, and direct it over toward where, at least in the standards of Thomas Breakwell, that they can at least have the opportunity to peek through the hole to look at something, which they would never do if they were constantly sucked into that material struggling diversion that seems to be thrown at people to choose from before they have the wisdom to be able to do so.
One of the things that becomes very clear and will in 2 or 3 sessions from now is that Wilber makes the point that there is, in the final analysis, no separation whatsoever between the material and the spiritual. So by helping somebody physically, you're also helping them spiritually. Right? You're helping them to confront whatever the particular problem is that they're dealing with, which will eventually have the effect of freeing energy that they have in perhaps a more productive way. And we have to have that hierarchy of needs in mind so that we can see which issues they're having at the moment and how to effectively help them get past those issues. So we can sort of nudge them in that direction. I mean, first of all, we have the sense that it is possible for them to grow. That's a big, to me, that's a surprise to a lot of people right now. They aren't aware that there's all this room to grow at the top beyond where they are. And they haven't had anybody express that positive sense of their value that says, you know, there's more to you than you're currently allowed to show, you know, and to encourage that to come out, to show some of those hidden virtues that haven't had a chance to display themselves yet. Anyway, I'm kind of rambling at this point, but I hope this becomes a bit clearer when we start to see that Wilbur says that spirit and the material are not two, which is what non-dual means. That's the highest insight that Buddhism has to offer us. Anyway, I'm kind of jumping the gun here by several hours, but anyway.
Mark, do you see that Meryl has her hand?
I
up?
do have, yeah, I was just about to turn to her now.
So I raised it with a question, but now I'm adding a comment just because of what was just said. And I find that, okay, I'll try to make it simple. When I pray, if I'm looking for an answer, that's usually going up the wrong tree. But when I start asking a question to God, it feels more, you know, I think that addresses some of this striving aspect or struggling aspect that was being talked about. But what I had raised my question for was, okay, what's a prophet?
Mm-hmm. Okay, Harold. Or
The
Jack.
quick
A
quick
prophet
answer is
with a capital P is one thing and a small p is another.
I'm talking about the capital P, the real one, not the, you know, the they can predict the future and all that stuff.
Well, I agree with everyone who says we need to change the vocabulary if we can and introduce this term manifestation with a capital M. That seems to be for a purpose. You know, there are terms like savior, prophet, messenger, lawgiver, enlightened one. And in one sense, they're all, you know, interchangeable. But in terms of understanding the level of reality that they represent, we need that term manifestation quite a bit, I think. Anyway, yeah.
I was just going to throw in
Okay,
that
there's a Christian writer called Richard Rohr. Does anybody know about him? Yeah. And he, as far as I can tell, he is getting more at what a prophet is, but I can't put it into words, especially not at this hour of night. But it has something to do, it has something to do with, how do we put it? Like moving from, oh, no, I can't even find the words.
Meryl,
Sorry.
could you do a little bit of investigating and then maybe type up a couple of paragraphs or quotes from him that would explain it, and then I'll share it with everybody?
Okay, I'll write that down. Okay.
Homework.
I just want to
Right.
throw out the name Nostradamus.
That's in the terms of the small p prophet.
Yeah, I'm not talking about those. I'm talking, no, I think Richard Rohr, as far as I can tell, he seems right on as far as I can tell.
Okay. So you know more about him than most of us, except for perhaps Harold and maybe Jack. So maybe you could enlighten us with a couple of pithy quotes.
Okay, I've got it on my do list.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay, we're running out of time, folks. We're 8 minutes over already. I see Jack and David or Belinda has another comment, so that'll have to be the end of it. So Jack first, and let's make them short.
Oh, boy, that's hard for me. Anyway, profit is another one of these words that's being misused today. And we're not going to solve this at the level of vocabulary. We have to solve it at the level of understanding. Yes, Baha'is have a new term, manifestation of God, but we have to explain what that means to non-Baha'is. Manifestation of God can also exist in Christianity. That's what the Epiphany is. The Epiphany is a manifestation of God. But we have a very classical understanding of what a prophet is. If you look at the Greek word, it means someone who speaks on behalf of God. So a prophet is somebody who is commissioned by God, a pure soul, a special soul, who is commissioned by God to take a message to a nation or today in the coming of Baha'u'llah to mankind. Now, it's a lot more complicated because there are major and minor prophets. And I mean, this is a whole, Mark could probably give a whole course just on this alone. So, you know, and Barack Obama said in one of his speeches, we're politicians, not prophets. So I think he had a sort of an understanding of it. Belinda may be correct up to a certain point that the average Christian has lost the real meaning of it, but not entirely, because prophets and messengers is, I mean, I'm speaking for us Baha'is, it's all through our sacred writings. We're not going to substitute the word manifestation for prophet and solve the problem that way. That's not going to happen. We have to look at all of the terms, what they mean, and get the definitions and see it in the context of a deepening, you know. So Meryl would think for Jonah was the prophet who didn't want to be the prophet, you know, and he was commissioned to go, was it to Nineveh? And he was swallowed by the whale. But what did the whale do? The whale spewed him out and made him go and fulfill his mission, which he did. So yeah, so I don't know, Meryl, if that helps. I'm sure Roar has a new definition and somebody's going to call him a prophet before long, I'm sure. But Baha'is have a rather classical definition of the term. Very special. For us, the word prophet is a very special word. It's not an average. It's not just somebody who predicts the future. Or
No,
somebody,
that's not what Roar's talking about.
no, I know that. But I'm saying for a lot of people, a prophet like Nostradamus, you know, Sai was referring to Nostradamus. They call him a prophet in the sense that he predicted the future correctly. But that's not what Baha'is mean by prophet at all.
Okay, folks, Belinda's taken her hand down, so I guess, did you want to say anything further, Belinda? No, she's not. Okay. Well, why don't we call it a night then, because we're 12 minutes over time. That was great. Good discussion, folks. I hope you got something out of it. Let's get together in another week and we'll talk about states of consciousness in the trained version of them.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay. Take care of yourselves.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Linda.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Lovely to see everybody.
Linda, this is Danielle.
Bye.
I am not on the list, I think.
You're not?
Linda.